Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, they still got some business to attend to in the 2024 season. That will not stop Dan Lanning from continuing to build this roster for 2025. Landing the number one safety in the transfer portal, Dillon Thieneman. What makes so much sense for me is that, look, there's not a lot of holes or cracks in this Oregon team. They're pretty much elite everywhere you look. If there was one position where I think maybe Oregon can get a little bit more from heading into 2025, it was at the safety spot. Not a knock on Kobe Savage, damn good football player, and he's given Oregon exactly what they wanted from him, just a reliable veteran safety. Dillon Thieneman, he to me is a difference maker in the back end. You look at the safety position for Oregon heading into 2025, going into 2024, it was a little bit of a question mark because the depth wasn't always there. And you had a lot of true freshmen that were kind of on red alert in terms of, hey, we might need to play significant snaps. They've been able to stay healthy. 2025 is going to be a different story. I mean, you talk about Aaron Flowers, Peyton Woodyard, Kingston Lopa, Trey McNutt coming in the 2025 class. Now you throw in Dillon Thieneman. You're going to lose your two starting safeties. It's probably going to be a better position than it was in 2024, in 2025. Difference maker, game changer at the safety position. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, to the Oregon fans, appreciate you guys. It's been a blast talking this team in 2024. It was a blast talking this team in the transfer portal 12 months ago. A lot of y'all been rocking with the fellas for a long time. We appreciate it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I'll let you sell the people. I think this is such a big get for the Oregon Ducks.
And it's something they've been missing. It just feels even Tyshim Johnson, Kobe Savage, like solid players, but I don't feel like either play the role that Dillon Thieneman can play in terms of his range in the back end. Like those two play really particularly good in the box. They're good tacklers, but they don't have his type of range, his ability to play that kind of single high safety look that he specialized doing at Purdue. So I think he does kind of fill that hole, not only from a talent standpoint, because I do think he's probably the better safety of all three of those guys, but also from a skill set standpoint. And that's a position that it has felt like they've probably been missing for the last 2 years.
And it's not a knock. It's not a knock at Tyshim Johnson. Like Tyshim Johnson to me is just playing a little out of position. Tyshim Johnson is an elite nickel, in my opinion. Now, wouldn't say taking one for the team, but kind of doing what Oregon needs. And you don't go undefeated so far without your safeties playing good football. Like they've been good. It's never good enough for Dan Lanning. Like he's always going to try to get better. This is one of those guys that gets you better. And Dill, that kind of the same conversation we had last year, and we just talked about with Texas. When you recruit the high school ranks like Dan Lanning does, you get to be selective in the transfer portal. Like, hey, we're not desperate going into the transfer portal. We're just going to pick and choose some of the best players in the portal and kind of round out our roster. They did that going into 2024. They're doing the exact same thing heading into 2025.
And I imagine the portal class size will get smaller and smaller. I mean, they've obviously, Dan Lanning's probably 2 years behind essentially where Steve Sarkisian was. But now that he's kind of got his classes in place year after year after year, I'd imagine these portal classes get smaller. The quality of player goes up each year. And that's kind of where you want it. Because, again, I don't even think Dan Lanning, if you asked him, would have had to have taken as many guys as he had to take in his first couple of years at Oregon. I'm sure he'd prefer that number to be down and the quality up and use more of the freshmen he's been able to.
And their hit rate in the transfer portal is so incredible. Like you go back and just look at all the transfer portal additions that they made prior to the 2024 season. Like most of them are playing a very significant role. You know, guys like Dylan Gabriel and guys like Derek Harmon playing significant roles in why this Oregon team has been the best team in the country so far this year. To kind of round out our conversation on Dillon Thieneman, Dill, you talked about the ball hawking capability, which is, again, something that maybe Oregon's trying to get in 2025. 6 interceptions as a true freshman. Look, that doesn't come by luck. You kind of got to go find the football. The last 2 seasons at Purdue, I mean, as a true freshman and as a sophomore, he both times led Purdue in tackles with over 100 combined tackles. And he's the only guy that misses 12% of his tackles. So you're making 100 tackles a year and only missing 12% of them.
And he's making those in like very open space. It's not like he's kind of filling in holes where there's a lot of these are good quality open field tackles, really hard to make, really hard to find guys who make them at the clip he makes them. So again, that 12% number I think looks even better when you kind of consider what he does in terms of, again, playing pretty much that single high safety almost exclusively, it felt like, at Purdue, and just being really good.
Well, you taught, so the free safety spots where he excels, he does everything though. I mean, he's spent 215 snaps in the box, 102 at nickel. And this is a guy that at 6 foot, 200 plus pounds can come into the box and give you a very, very solid run defender as well. This is a safety that checks all the boxes. And we know Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy want to be very, very creative in terms of how you use your guys in the back end. There's nothing you can't do with a guy like Dillon in the back end. And to round out the conversation, like the safety position for the next couple of years for Oregon, it's Dillon plus Aaron Flowers, Peyton Woodyard, Trey McNutt, Kingston Lopa, might be forgetting some other really good players. That is incredibly loaded. And a guy like Aaron Flowers, just like my guy heading into 2025, I don't even know if he's going to be starting for this Oregon defense. It's a master class of roster building for Dan Lanning, and they're not done. Again, I think for me, Dill, the biggest concern is probably the offensive tackle spot with Johnny Cornelius leaving. And I would guess, I think Josh Connolly's played himself into a first-round NFL draft pick, so I think Josh Connolly will probably be going to the NFL too, which means you got to replace both your starting tackles. There are some answers on this roster, but I don't know if there's obvious answers. Here's an obvious answer that Oregon's going after in the transfer portal. Like Isaiah World. He's 6'8", he's 310, 457 pass pro opportunities in the 2024 year, 0 sacks, 11 quarterback hurries. I mean, elite numbers in pass protection from that big of an offensive tackle. I don't even need to start in terms of how he can move people in the run game. This is probably, if you were to ask Dan Lanning, hey, what's the biggest, I wouldn't even know if I'd say concern, but question mark on your roster heading into 2025, he'd probably say starting tackle. They're going after the number one. I would not be surprised if they're able to land Isaiah World as well.
Because when you have two guys who have played as much football over the past 2 years and really no one's had much of a shot to even get involved in that battle, honestly, like it is kind of like you probably do want something proven. Because again, you're going to lose two guys who you just said, like Johnny Cornelius can be hovering around that first round area. Connerly just might be in the first round. Like it's going to be really interesting to see where those two guys go. But at the end of the day, they've kept everyone else off the field, and for good reason. They're awesome.
And they've stayed healthy, like knock on wood. So it's not like we've got an opportunity to see a ton of other tackles and what they can do. Let's talk about another one. Probably the biggest name in the transfer portal, Bear Alexander. You're losing Derek Harmon. You're losing Jamari Caldwell. Look, I think you got some guys coming up, right? Amari Washington is flashing. Would probably be starting on most teams if he wasn't behind the guys like Harmon and Jamari Caldwell. You have some guys like Jericho Johnson and Aiden Breland kind of working their way up the pipeline. I think Dan Lanning has recognized how beneficial it's been to have just 2 game records in the middle and Jamari Caldwell and Derek Harmon. You probably want to add another. Bear Alexander, look, is it inconsistent? And are there some off-the-field stuff for Bear Alexander? Yes, absolutely. The ceiling of Bear Alexander, I use the same analogy with Lee Hunter Dill. If you just showed me 20 of the best reps from Bear Alexander, looks like the best football player on the field. This kid is super talented. Can you get the best out of him? That's the question. Again, I don't want to speak on him because I don't know him personally, but there are some off-the-field stuff going on. To me, this makes so much sense. And I said this a couple of days ago. There are not a ton of football teams where I think they have the culture to bring in a guy like Bear Alexander. Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks are one of those teams. And if there is a program that can maximize Bear Alexander and keep him focused on just football, that strikes me as Oregon. And to me, this seems to make way too much sense for Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks to make this one happen.
And it's when you go back, like I'm sure Dan Lanning has some level of relationship from his recruiting standpoint at that Georgia team when they were kind of bringing him in. So you do wonder if he has kind of an inside mind, if you will, into what he's bringing in and whether it's going to work. Because I think you are right with the new era of college football, like that sort of managing that type of player, I think it's tough because at the end of the day, like when you see guys leaving mid-year, that that feels like that could be something tough to sell to your locker room. And again, I'm not in the trenches
Agreed.
with it. I don't know exactly what's going on, but that is something I think of like, is that something you want to build in? Because obviously Dan Lanning, he has that thing humming right now. Like everyone's kind of
So,
pulling the
but
same.
my question is, like, yeah, Dan Lanning might want to not, like, what I'm trying to get at is, Dill, name me a program. If somebody got the best out of Bear Alexander, if I asked you who could it be, what would your answer be?
Be
It's
like
got to start
Texas,
with Dan
Georgia,
Lanning and the
Oregon. I
Oregon
don't
Ducks.
know.
I think Michigan would be another, like those programs that have a good culture. And so you're bringing a guy like Bear Alexander. It's just like conformity. It's like you either want to either get what we're doing or you don't belong
Well,
here.
and they got like he doesn't step in and like almost unseats everyone else because they got a lot of dogs who are doing the right
Yeah.
things and being the type of
Yes.
teammates and players you kind of want.
100% agree. To me, it makes a ton of sense. I love because as like a college football fan, I want to see Bear Alexander play his best football because watching him play his best football is a blast. I think he would do it in Eugene, Oregon. Mansour Delane, Dill, this is your guy, one of the best corner alley. You look, I don't even know if Oregon needs to do this, but like Dan Lanning's not going to stop. Like if there's an opportunity to get this team better, we are going to do it. The cornerback position is loaded, not to mention Brandon Finney and Naheem Offord coming in the 2025 class. You're going to be young, though. You lose Jabbar Muhammad, Nico Reed, Dante Manning, guys that have kind of played exclusively at the boundary cornerback spot so far this year. You want to supplement that with some experience? Mansour Delane
And
from Virginia
also,
Tech.
Mansour Delane's the type of transfer no one's going to turn down because we just talked about the Eric Singleton and possibly moving on or like making the move to Texas. It's like, yeah, Texas has a deep wide receiver room for sure. But Eric Singleton's the level of player that I don't think really anyone turns down. Mansour Delane, especially when you go back to his true freshman year, I mean, he is a great, great football player. Obviously, like a guy that again, I know there's a lot of teams with good cornerback rooms. He's just not the type of guy you turn down if he wants to be part of your team because he to me is like that type of level.
And what I'll say is the guy's little brother, 5-star safety, committed to Ohio State over Oregon, has a good experience in Eugene. Go get his little brother in the next year's transfer portal. I'm just kidding. That's kind of getting a little ahead of ourselves there. But again, I think you said it best. If he wants to be an Oregon Duck, you're not saying no to him because he can be one of the best cornerbacks in the country. We'll close it down there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.